Hello, I'm Anatole, and this is my review of Twilight Zone Season 1, Episode 3, titled Doomsday on Denton, received a score of 7.3 on IMDb. And from the score on IMDb, I think you can tell that this is a somewhat controversial is not quite the word, but there are those who are detractors for this episode, and I do feel it's a weaker episode, but thematically it's quite interesting. So, first thing I want to mention is that because the show was made by a writing auteur, and of course I'm referring to Rod Serling, that we can see some common themes from his work in the episode, because the creator of the show, the writer had such a strong hand. You can see how he influenced the show. So before he was handed the assignment of being the creative force of Twilight Zone, he did a number of teleplays, among which were Requiem for a Heavyweight and Patterns. And the themes of both of those shows turn up in this particular episode of Twilight Zone. So in Requiem for a Heavyweight, you see a man who finds value and self-worth through violence. And in Patterns, you see the idea of masculinity through work being challenged. And both of those themes show up in this episode. So we have the character of Denton, a washed-up has-been who at one point found renown and self-worth through his ability to kill other people. Because he was the fastest gun in the West, he became famous. Other people came to him for gunfights, and he was able to win those. And because he was the fastest gun, he became famous and got a degree of self-respect. But that led into a cycle of being famous, so other people learned of him, and other men who wanted to be as famous as him came and challenged him to a gunfight, and they would lose, and that would increase his fame, and that would attract more attention towards him, and so then the kill count got higher and higher, till he says that the moment that led to him giving up that life was when he realized he killed a 16-year-old boy, and he couldn't just he became self-aware of the cost of his fame and self-worth and the way that his life created that. So he tried to unplug himself from that by becoming a drunk. And we see in this episode the futility of that, because while he is able to escape the cycle of violence, he also finds no self-worth, and that leads to a lifestyle of addiction to alcohol. And the irony of this episode is that when he begins to find his path back towards dignity, he finds that that only comes through, again, this cycle of violence. And Rod Serling ties these three things together: the gun, the bottle, and the killing, the winning of the gunslinging, the gunfight. So that is interesting. Thematically, that's interesting. However, what doesn't work so well is that there is a little bit of a feeling of contrivance to the episode, and also the lack of character. The main character, Denton, is given a little bit of pathos, but we don't learn more of his history other than he had this one tragic gunfight where he began to feel regret. We don't learn if he ever loved anyone, if he has a family. We don't learn about his family. So the whole episode, and that kind of, because the form is so compressed, 22, 24-minute episodes, all of the episodes have to deal with this lack of space for character development. But because this episode so much relies upon giving us the tropes of a particular genre, in this case it's the Western, and then trying to give us a greater dimension to that trope. So we don't have a comedic drunk, we have a pathetic drunk. There's little left than plot. And We don't really get anything that's shockingly twisted in the ending of this. Two gunfighters meet, and they both win, and because they both win, they're both crippled, and that's the end of their gunfighting. So, because Twilight Zone tends to have a moral component, I had to really search for what the moral component of this episode was, and I come down to, I think it's the irony of the value of masculinity in the culture that Rod Serling was creating this episode. And so that's the late 1950s, that violence has a cost, and you can't define your worth by being a man because you're able to be better at this life of violence. The only escape is to just completely renounce that life of violence. And so that's my take. The thematically interesting show, but plot-wise, not so much. And again, that score on IMDb of 7 point blah 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 3 or 4 also it reaffirms my view on the episode. And that's my take on Twilight Zone Season 1, Episode 3, Doomsday on Denton. I hope you enjoyed it, and you'll join me again on my channel for another video review. That's all for now. Take care and be well.